What makes good art good? What even is the point of art? Is Jolt Cola still in business? What is an aesthetic? Why do I even bother? These are some of the questions that we hope to get to the bottom of today, as I flex my mediocre art history knowledge and analyze some contemporary art trends. But art, as a topic, is probably too big to tackle in one video, so we're going to narrow our focus within the field of graphic design and talk today about logo design. First, I'll introduce some of my own logo design and branding experience and some of the lessons I've learned along the way. And then we're going to look at some brands which have recently rebranded and redesigned their logos in the past couple of years. And then finally, we're going to hopefully find a logo in need of a redesign and use some of the lessons that we've picked up from the previous part to hopefully do a branding, design, rehabilitation, rescue, refresh. And who knows, might be some fun. I'm kind of jazzed up, kind of excited about this. So let's go for it. So like many people, I got into graphic design out of a combination of two things. One is just an appreciation for visual branding and art in general, and two is sort of out of this existential fear of becoming a starving artist. So I joke, but, I'd be lying if I didn't actually make note of the fact that graphic design is a super dominant force as artists enter the workforce. I don't think it's the worst thing because I think graphic design gives you those sort of foundational experiential moments where you get to understand the design principles and all of the sort of foundational things that apply to all the other mediums that I've at least worked in. So, looking back and looking at 18-year-old Casey applying to college and thinking, I might do art. And then I looked at the list of options and I'm like, graphic design, that sounds like the safest bet. And, I'm kind of glad that I did make that decision. I ended up finishing with an illustration degree, but graphic design gave me all of those fundamentals to really understand how to play around with animation and videography just based on those design principles. So I think that most designers would agree that one of the purest tests of a designer's ability is creating a logo. And that's because a logo is sort of this distillation of the brand's essence. It's meant to be their soul in a sort of visual representation. And that's a really tall task for any designer to do, especially when you're working with clients and you're trying to infuse your own design methodology into the process. And hopefully they've come to you as a designer because they see your abilities and they want you to put that into their logo and into their branding. But, I think that distilling a concept down to that purest form of representation can be really challenging but equally rewarding. So logos are typically comprised of a combination of two visual elements, typography and iconography. So typography is usually just used as a way to represent the name of the brand. Obviously, they want you to know who the they are. But typography is a subtle art form, and brands use different fonts and typefaces to differentiate themselves from the flock and to create a certain vibe associated with their branding or their product. So typography might seem like the boring part to some designers, myself included, but the industry as a whole is definitely shifting towards a reliance on typography as the aesthetic sort of shifts further and further into minimalism. Remember that word. We're going to be hearing that a lot. So we'll talk more about what types of type are hot right now and contemporary, but first let's talk about iconography. So this includes anything in the logo which isn't typographic. This means shapes, icons, illustrations, anything that provides further visual stimulation. These visual components are what can turn your logo into a low whoa. Let's do another take of that. These graphic components can turn your logo into a low whoa. Nailed it. Many brands use a combination of typography and a singular icon for their logo. But there are typically multiple iterations of that logo within the branding parameters, each serving their own distinct purpose, but all cohesive in their stylistic choices. Some would consider the ultimate goal of their logo to be identifiable without any text, relying only on the icon. But this isn't always the case. Clients can overcorrect in this regard and ask for a logo which is hyper-literal and kind of does too much. So one of my first ever clients wanted branding for her dance studio, and she wanted a logo which included 3 things: a dancing girl, a diamond, and a flower. So I tried my best. It was really a tall task, but I ended up sending over 3 or 4 different sketches to no avail before we both sort of parted ways and the project was left unfinished. If I had a decent audience on here, I would issue some sort of challenge maybe to see if somebody can come up with a logo using those 3 elements and the name of the studio. But alas, I can only dream. Like and subscribe. I don't know, maybe we'll do a video down the line where I try to reattempt this and give it another shot. Anyways, if you haven't picked it up, minimalism is the name of the game in corporate graphic design. And this trend has sort of led the field to become further and further minimalizing until it's just led the entity to become this homogeneous singularity. And everything in corporate branding these days kind of looks the same. But, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They're all sort of chasing each other's tails in that regard. And I'm not against it. I think that minimalism is key to making a good design. And you should be able to trim the, BS and get to the core of the ism of a design. But, I do think that this trend in the larger design community has made it easier for individuals to stand out and create work that does sort of break the mold and create unique design. But before we get too excited and jump into modernizing an existing logo, let's look at some corporate makeovers which have happened in the last couple of years and check out some of the brands which have updated their logos and see what we can learn. All right, Lord & Taylor. I don't know what Lord & Taylor sells or if it's a band or I don't know, but they're selling me on this logo. And yeah, so they seem to look a little bit like Nat Geo actually with their choices. They've taken the black and turned it into a gray, totally revamped everything here, and gone with a much more modern aesthetic. And yeah, I dig it. I think that the old ways of using scripted fonts are pretty much going out of style in certain cases, so we're gonna see some of those shifts maybe in other logos. Toyota may have kicked off what you'll start to see as a massive trend in these car brands with just simplification of these emblems which had existed in their branding as their logo. And they've taken the emblem and condensed it into an icon. So, these are meant for the digital age. This transformation sort of has to happen for all of these brands as their stuff is more printed online than it is in actual print. So this transformation, it keeps the classic red format, puts it in a box, and takes that icon and sort of stamps it out of the negative space of that box. And then the font itself doesn't look like it's changed at all, but they've reduced things down to just 2 colors, simplified the palette, no gradients, no drop shadows, and whatever's going on with that icon. Yeah, solid choice. You'll start to see more of this. So in 2019, Reebok did something here that's a little different. They moved against the modernizing trend and kind of embraced that retro look and actually went back to one of their old font choices and created a new hybrid of their old logo. So yeah, to each their own. I think that their old logo kind of was dope, so I like that they've brought it back. And the Reebok of 2018 or whatever was leading up to this just is kind of lifeless, and maybe one of those perils of stepping too far into the minimalist world. So it looks like Reebok did a little bit of a redirect back to their old ways, and we'll see. I don't know if Reebok sells any shoes anymore. I haven't seen anybody wearing them, but feel free to leave a comment if you're rocking Reeboks. All right, another 2019 reboot of a car brand logo. This previous icon, which was obviously just meant to look like the hood of a Volkswagen, is outdated. They need something again for the digital age, kind of like Toyota did. And so again, you're going to see more of this. TGI Fridays is gross. I don't know. I mean, yeah, their logo, whatever. They did it. Congrats. I don't like TGI Fridays. We're not going to spend any more time here. BMW. Again, another car brand to take things from the emblematic look and really simplify the iconography to something that's just a little more palatable for the digital audience. And yeah, well done. Very simple. So I've included these for dictionary.com and thesaurus.com because I think that they're pretty relevant changes which are emblematic of some of the things we've been talking about. Just simplification, making things legible and comprehensive, And I think that these little additional icons that they've created are pretty genius in order to sort of tie it to the branding, emphasize what you're getting into. If thesaurus.com doesn't say it, a little T with a book shape is definitely going to really ingrain that into the viewer. So yeah, I dig the way that they've reduced from the italic font into something that's a bit more bold. It's in that sort of Helvetica family that we're going to see everywhere. But yeah, solid. So Nissan's done something a little bit different than the rest of these car brands in taking an existing logo and just compressing it into something that looks like an alpha channel of what already existed. This is something that is a bit more referential to the shape of the original logo, but they've done something different in that it's just been reduced and you don't have the full shape, more of an implication of the shape. And yeah, the font itself has been spread out, a little more room to breathe, and made the center point of it less of something that you would see on a car and more something you would see on a letterhead or on a website. So yeah, modernization, the digital age, minimalization. All right, so hopefully we've learned a thing or two from looking at those examples, and we can take a logo that is in desperate need of our help and update it with our own zest of life, with our own twist on the existing branding and the ideas that the brand wants to be fulfilled with this logo. So let's jump in. Actually, you know what? I don't feel like doing it right now. Let's take a break. I'm gonna go do something else and probably come back and do this later. But I have some ideas of different brands, so we'll figure one out in the meantime, and when I come back, I'll have a brand ready. We're gonna reboot it. Get excited. I'd like to take a second to thank the sponsor of today's episode and many other episodes, Jolt Cola. Jolt sent us over a single can of Bang Energy and asked us to taste it. And they also asked us to emphasize how terrible it is. Boy, is that horrible. Perhaps local vendors should start stocking Jolt on their shelves in lieu of Bang Energy. Thanks, Jolt. Now back to the show. So I ended up spending a decent amount of time looking around for logos which might be in need of our help and our rehabilitation. And I actually ended up finding a couple of different runner-ups, one of which was eBay, which I ended up wasting a little bit of time messing around with. But I eventually came across one which was definitively the one. And that is when I came across an article detailing the CIA revealing their new rebranding in 2021. And I knew what I needed to do. But before I show you guys their new rebranding, let's look at their original logo a little bit. So the original logo for the Central Intelligence Agency came out in 1950. You can see that it's using some symbology with the central images here. You've got an eagle's head, which is a typically American representation, over top of a shield with a pointed bottom, and a 16-pointed compass there in the middle, which represents apparently I've looked this up, represents the US's presence around the world. Everything sort of plays in line with some of the other branding across different military branches, so it's all sort of cohesive, the color palette. But yeah, it's pretty old school. There's nothing inherently off-putting about it, but it does feel dated. So hold your breath, because now let's check out the new unveiling of the CIA's logo in 2021. Bruh. Clearly, graphic design is their passion over at the CIA headquarters, and somebody made the bold decision to say yes to this. And this just hurts. In smaller formats, you can clearly see that this background texture that they've implied is really collapsing because of the sort of closeness of the lines. And then the other off-putting thing to me that really stands out is just the triplification of Central Intelligence Agency around the border of it. I don't see why you need that redundant element 3 times. Maybe it's just something that it's super military intelligence that I don't have. But yeah, so we're going to try to rebrand this again and do something that maybe will get the attention of the government in a good way. I don't know, maybe we'll just keep this a secret. But yeah, let's check it out. Let's try. We'll see what we can do. It seems like an easy improvement, but I'm going to try to take some of the original elements and make something that's a bit more modern, meet somewhere in the middle, probably closer to the original. But yeah, I don't know how much inspiration I can draw from this other than maybe like a grayscale color palette, or I don't know. We'll see.
One eternity later.
All right, y'all. So spent some time here in Illustrator goofing around, trying to create some sort of new and improved version of this CIA logo. And as I mentioned before, I really actually kind of liked the original one, despite the fact that it looks a bit outdated. So I tried to incorporate a lot of the elements of the original one into my redesign, but I tried to think more simplistically, use fonts that are more modern and some sans serif stuff, and generally just try to simplify some of the line work. So without further ado, here it is. So I started with doing something that is just like a black and white version of the logo to try and make sure that I got all the composition and the spacing how I want it. And then from there, I actually went and revised it to have the colors of the original logo from 1950. So yeah, not much to say. I know that this is very hit or miss, and I just went with one logo here. Usually when you're presenting to a client, you would give them at least two. With the CIA, I think you would give them 20, 30. So yeah, really fun project. I had a blast with this. I actually the whole time was like really thinking about how many of these I can do in the future just because the process was so enjoyable. And yeah, I really appreciate you guys watching, and this is a really long video, so I'll try and cut it short here. I appreciate you sticking it out all the way to the grand reveal. And yeah, I'm losing my voice. Drink some. Boy, is that horrible. I don't know. I'm gonna go to bed. Got the shakes though. Just one sip from that shit. Jesus.